Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. Welcome to the injury update for week 2 of the fantasy football season. There are a couple of big names. Over on my side, you can see the updated rankings for the wide receivers. I just have basically the must-starts taken off of the screen. One big thing from the Minnesota versus Philadelphia game here, it's the DeAndre Swift versus Kenneth Gainwell going forward. I own Kenneth Gainwell, and I am terrified. They are playing against Tampa Bay next week on Monday night, and so unless we get some sort of clarity on what to expect moving forward, or like Kenny Gainwell is going to be out again, and we know that already, I believe it's going to be very tough to start either one of them in a good matchup, so that sucks. We'll see how things shake out throughout the week, but my take on it would be tie goes to the incumbent, and it's kind of a tie right now since they started the year with Kenneth Gainwell, didn't really give much work to DeAndre Swift, and the matchups are not equal. Like, I was gonna be starting Kenneth Gainwell in this matchup no matter what up against Minnesota, so it's tough to rate their performances against one another, but obviously DeAndre Swift has the higher upside. One has to wonder, is the only reason that he was held back from that starter role just learning the system yet, his understanding of it, his comfort level with it? Was the team a little bit concerned on that end? And then you see how he did in that game, and it's like, okay, well, let's just give him the reins. I don't know. I think it'll be back to Kenneth Gainwell and or a split, or it will be what we kind of suspected all off-season, not really, or it might just be very much something that we've seen from Philadelphia in the past. Let's put it like that, which would be it's matchup dependent. Now, DeAndre Swift wouldn't have been my first pick if they were going for the matchup dependency. Then I would have thought it'd be like Rashad Penny, which is why I was kind of on board with him. I did end up changing my rankings, though. Had DeAndre Swift ranked ahead of him a little bit. But hopefully anybody who had DeAndre Swift ended up playing him for whatever reason and then got rewarded for that. Now, I do have one thing that I need to talk about before we get into the injuries, and that is the fact that Ron Rivera is an idiot. Now, everything that I can tell, him as a person, I like him. He seems likable from everything that I've heard about him and just interviews and everything. Seems like a good guy, all right? But apparently he has read something that has led him to believe that altitude sickness does not impact a person until after 24 hours. Now, they're playing Denver this week, at Denver. So he is bringing his team into Denver, into the Mile High Stadium, well, the city of the Mile High Stadium, less than 24 hours prior to kickoff. It basically is as short of a time prior to kickoff as he can possibly do is what the plan is for them. I am very strongly considering moving down all of the Washington players, a spot or 3, and raising the Denver players up a spot or 2 in my rankings. Now, I did just do some adjustments to my rankings over here. Ended up moving up, I think, Michael Thomas, Treylon Burks, and Elijah Moore a little bit up ahead of this group. So, ultimately, I actually ended up doing that. I also raised running backs for Denver up just a little bit, actually in part thinking of this. So, my thought is that the Washington players on both sides of the ball are going to be quite gassed, which isn't abnormal for players playing in Denver. That's why they have this home field advantage. But there is some precedence for this from Ron Rivera. This is not a new thing. He did this back in 2021, and the team that year tied their lowest score for all of the season at 10 points. The thing is, where I'm not going to be like, they weren't playing some shoddy defense. The Denver defense back in 2021 was still a really good defense at that point in time. So who really knows for sure how that impacted them or not in that game without like maybe going back and watching it, which I did not do. As far as the other side of the ball, the Broncos only put up 17 points, which once again, the Broncos didn't really have a good offense that year, and do they have a good offense now? I don't know. So this is probably going to be another 17-10 game. The entire reason that Denver has such a big advantage at home is because they are acclimated to the environment. not because they shock their system every week like their opponent's systems get shocked. And that's why teams go in there early, usually, to try and adjust to the environment. I don't know, has Ron Rivera never stood outside in the cold or gone from a hot place to a cold place to a hot place? The body takes time to acclimate to new environments. It responds to a new environment pretty quickly. It doesn't, if you were to go from a hot, oxygen-rich atmosphere all the way to one with no oxygen, I guess there's an adaptation period of the amount of time that you can hold your breath before you die, if you want to count that, but that's just minutes. None of this makes sense to me. They're going to have oxygen on the sidelines. I gave you all the relevant information. There's some past precedents for this. If you want to have that impact your lineups or not, that's up to you. Now we're on to the injury report. If you did not notice, running backs over on the side over there. Arizona, nothing. Atlanta, Cordero Patterson is back. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he is utilized. That's not going to impact the fact that I'm not playing him. It's not going to impact the fact that I am playing Bijan Robinson for sure, and I am likely to play, based on my rankings here, Tyler Algier if I have him. I understand if you don't feel comfortable with that. I will say that much. I don't know about the Green Bay run defense yet. As far as Baltimore goes for injuries, Mark Andrews once again had a quote saying, God willing, after a couple of limited practices through the first 2 days. And last week he said the same thing, God willing, and I was like, that concerns me. That did concern me for a day, but he is still technically questionable, but very, very good sign is that he was a full participant earlier today on Friday. And something to keep in mind for Baltimore, I don't always talk about offensive linemen or defensive injuries, but sometimes I will, and the offensive line for Baltimore is going to be quite banged up. They're going to be down 2 stud offensive linemen, Tyler Linderbaum and Ronnie Staley, and that does concern me a little bit for Justice Hill and Gus Edwards going up against Cincinnati, a pretty stout, usually run defense. But also, this is a game where there could be a lot of scoring. And we did get some news that the official depth chart now has Gus Edwards listed as the starter. My main concerns are beyond the offensive line is also just a split of some sort. I'm almost certain will happen. And the fact that they used Justice Hill in the end zone with those, high quality kind of touches. So that does concern me for the upside of Gus Edwards. Somebody dropped Gus Edwards this week in my league, so I picked him up. I had Rashee Rice as a hopeful guy kind of on my waiver wire. And I have Raheem Mostert in my lineup right now. And although there is a mile of difference between Raheem Mostert, where is even 21, and Gus Edwards at 30, I don't know. I'm thinking of playing Gus Edwards over. I feel like the ceiling's higher, and I had A.J. Brown go this week, so that didn't help my team. So I feel like I might need a ceiling shot. And to me right now, that feels more like Gus Edwards. Let me know if you have any input on that. Now, let's get this pace kicking up. Carolina Panthers playing on Monday night, so we only have 2 days of practice reports to go off of, but DJ Shark has been limited in those 2 days, so he is trending towards playing, one could assume. Chicago Bears cornerback Kyler Gordon is out, and this helps make things easier for Baker and the Buccaneers receivers. Last week, he apparently knew everything that was going to happen, still put in fantasy-wise an above-average performance, and overall, from what I've heard, I didn't watch the game, an okay performance. So, that makes it easier for them to have some success this week in a game that I already expected them to find some success. How much, I don't know. On top of that, too, to make things a little bit more favorable for these Buccaneers guys, and this did not impact my rankings in either of these things, but the Bears defensive coordinator will not be in Tampa Bay this weekend due to personal reasons. So the head coach will now be calling the defensive plays, could make for a couple of mistakes to occur that Tampa Bay could take advantage of. Now, for the Dallas Cowboys, Brandon Cooks did not practice all 3 times this week. He is questionable with a sprained MCL, an injury that typically has an average recovery time of 2 to 3 weeks. But in the instance of a very minor sprain, he could be playing this weekend, and it is the case that it is a minor sprain. Jerry Jones has gone on record saying that it is going to be a game time decision for Brandon Cooks. I'm currently do not have him in my projections to start, in my rankings to start. In addition to that, it is a 4 p.m. game, so we're not really going to be able to know for sure if it's a game time decision. So I would just really plan on not playing Brandon Cooks if you can avoid that this week. And I would not plan on trusting or playing either of the other guys that might have increased roles. That would be Michael Gallup, and then Jalen Tolbert could come in and be the Brandon Cooks for the offense. He has zero production in the NFL so far. Going up against the Jets, I'm just going to avoid that whole situation, especially since it's a 4 p.m. game. The Denver Broncos tight end Greg Dulcich is out. I would not start Troutman, but you could if you would like to, I suppose. Why not? Jerry Jeudy is good to go. He is off of the injury report completely. I ranked him pretty highly, so this does not change my ranking on him at all. He will remain as a back-end wide receiver 2 for me, unless we get a report that he's going to be highly limited. I know there's been some talk about him being limited, but I don't think there's been anything official that's come from the coaching staff or anything like that. And if there was, that was from like Monday or Tuesday of this week. Then Green Bay Packers' Aaron Jones did not participate in practice all week. He is questionable. If you see Emmanuel Wilson get brought up from the practice squad, I believe that should happen on Saturday is when that has to happen, then you know that Aaron Jones is out. So then you can prepare for that. But you can always prepare ahead of time. But I don't even think it's a 50-50 thing. It's like a 70-30 thing maybe that he'll a 70% chance that he's not starting is what I'm going to put on it here, and I'm optimistic about the situation of him starting. Then Christian Watson did not participate on Wednesday or Thursday, but he was a limited participant on Friday, so he is officially questionable. I still have him ranked, as you might have noticed, so we'll see on that. I don't know, 50-50 kind of deal there. 50-50 is probably optimistic. For the Houston Texans, John Mechie is back, so he is a guy that he should get on the field now because Noah Brown was put on IR. He's a guy who I'm willing to, like a Rashee Rice, how I had him on my roster. If you have an open spot to just take a flyer on a guy and most likely drop them when you bring somebody up from your IR next week to make your lineup legal or whatever the case, he's the type of guy I would take a shot on. However, that will not be the case if CJ Stroud does not play because he just popped up on the injury report with a shoulder injury on Friday. So we don't know how severe that is or is not, but that is never a good thing for their likelihood of playing. So that is not good. Laramie Tunsil also is questionable now, and I believe that's also something that kind of popped up on Friday. So this offensive line has seen its fair share of injuries already. It's quite thin, and in general, I'm starting to get concerned for this team as a whole this week. I obviously liked Dameon Pierce a lot. If they're out CJ Stroud and Laramie Tunsil, I'll still probably not be too... I might move James Cook ahead of him. I think, though, I'm still going to be kind of optimistic about the potential. Receivers, taking a shot on Mechie and putting him on your bench this week aren't things that I'm going to mess with. That includes Nico Collins if CJ Stroud's not in at quarterback. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, Zach Moss is a full go. Evan Hull was placed on IR. We expect Zach Moss to start over Deion Jackson. I do think Deion Jackson will get some work. Obviously, he'll get some work. But Zach Moss should be starting 65% of the work or something like that would be the expectation. You could do worse if you need to play him, but I believe I have him, I think, ranked 36th. If you can't figure out who my top 2 tight ends are, I can't help you. So let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce, speaking of tight ends, is officially questionable, but he is set to go this weekend via Andy Reid. CH is officially questionable, and Pacheco is close to a must-start if there is no CEH. I've expressed some concerns about their usage. But no CH would be great in that matchup this weekend. So, either way, Pacheco's pretty much a running back too, either way. Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders, Jacoby Myers is out with that concussion. Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler did not practice all 3 times this week, and he is officially doubtful. And I do believe, technically, by the rules or whatever, that means he has less than a 5% chance of playing as far as the team is concerned. So I have Josh Kelly ranked 15th as my running back. You might have just noticed he is a strong running back start, but it is a tougher matchup going up against the Tennessee Titans this weekend. I'm optimistic about him having a good week. I'm not optimistic about him having a huge week. If Eckler is going, then you're going to play him. I would assume Josh Kelly would also be startable in that situation, because I would assume that you might see something like last week where they would split their workload. Joey Bosa is a game-time decision, and I think that gives you a little bit of extra confidence for the receivers of the Tennessee Titans. Then the Los Angeles Rams, Puka Nacua came up with an oblique injury on Thursday. I thought it was on Thursday, but see, the fantasy footballers have confused me on this. I'm going with what I thought. He, on Thursday, had an oblique injury, a little bit of a tweak, and he's said that he's ready to go. But they are playing against San Francisco this weekend, so I'm not too optimistic about how effective he'll be, how many touchdowns the Rams will score. But if you're in a dire circumstance, with how many targets he got last weekend, you could do worse as finding somebody. Then Teron Armstead for the Miami Dolphins on their offensive line looks likely to start. That helps a lot this week, especially going up against New England, especially if I'm playing Raheem Mostert. That would be helpful for that. Then the New England Patriots, Devontae Parker, had a limited practice all week, so he is officially questionable. Could play, could not play. You know, if he's a go, I would be a little bit less optimistic about trying Kendrick Bourne. If you were planning on playing him, that's all. As long as you have somebody else that's, somewhat relevant to play. I really wouldn't trust Kendrick Bourne this week anyways, but that would make me less confident in that. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints, who play on Monday Night Football, so they've only put 2 practices in so far. Kendre Miller has been limited in both of those, so I think he's trending towards playing, but we'll see. And Juwan Johnson was limited on Thursday, but then he was full go on Friday. So if you are planning on relying on Juwan Johnson, it will not hurt to make sure to check on his status tomorrow or today on Saturday. And just make sure that he was a full participant again, so that you don't put yourself into a rock and a hard place on Monday night. If all of a sudden all your players have started Sunday, then you got to know who you're going to drop or who are you going to play. Don't want that to happen. On to the New York Giants. Wan'Dale Robinson is doubtful. And for the New York Jets, Breece Hall is technically questionable, but he's a go. And their kicker, Greg Zuerlein, is 50-50 to play, just in case you're planning on relying on him. Pittsburgh Steelers, Monday Night Football game as well, so only 2 practices. But Deontay Johnson, I already have listed as out in my rankings. He is almost certainly out, but I don't think he's been declared out yet. Pat Freiermuth had a limited practice after his injury to start the week, but on Friday he was a full participant, so I suppose the same thing that I said for Juwan Johnson. You just make sure that he doesn't pop up on the injury report again on Saturday, as should always be the case for Monday Night Football players. Then for Tennessee Titans, we have DeAndre Hopkins did not participate all 3 times this week. He is officially listed as questionable. They do play in the 1 o'clock game, so it is easy to figure out if he's going to be a go or not prior to setting your lineups. If he does play, I'm probably going to be playing him and just trust the process at that point. If he does not play, then Treylon Burks, currently in my rankings, I have him not playing. Then Treylon Burks would jump up to being a borderline flex to a borderline wide receiver 2. I think I had him at wide receiver 25 right now. Going up against the Los Angeles Chargers is mostly a good thing. And I also moved Chigozie Okonkwo from, I think it was tight end 20. I did this last night. I made the change, and I didn't write down where I had him, but I believe he was at tight end 20. Moved him up to tight end 15 in my rankings. Right behind Dalton Kincaid, right ahead of Luke Musgrave. He's in that range of guys for me if there's no DeAndre Hopkins. And for the Washington Commanders, Curtis Samuel has been a limited participant in 2 out of 2 practices so far. Now we're going to look through my redemption lineup here that I set on DK. In at my quarterback spot for $6,700, I have Trevor Lawrence, and I was planning on going Calvin Ridley with him, but I moved down to my tight ends for the next pick, and I got to Evan Ingram, and I was like, you know what, I like that. And I didn't want to double up on the Jacksonville 2 weapons for Trevor Lawrence. So I'm just going with Evan Ingram this week for him as my little stack there. Then for the running back spots at $6,100 and $5,600 respectively, I have James Cook and Dameon Pierce. And for my wide receivers, I have T. Higgins in at $6,400. You see, it's the redemption squad as far as especially Dameon Pierce, T. Higgins, Deebo Samuel in at $5,600. If you recall from my wide receiver rankings video, I am optimistic about the play style of the Los Angeles Rams defense, maybe playing into a Deebo Samuel game instead of a Brandon Ayuk game. So I'm going to bet on that happening here. And DJ Moore, I have costing me $5,500 going up against Tampa Bay. I am, they got to try to get that right? So I think he'll get some opportunities here. And we saw a little bit in preseason of how it could work out. So I like it. As you know, in tight end, $4,800, Evan Ingram. In my flex spot, I have running back Jahmyr Gibbs at $6,300. And for my defense, I went with the Detroit Lions going up against Seattle. See if they can't get a little bit of pressure on that offensive line that's real banged up there and create a pick. Don't love their secondary, but Brian Branch, maybe get him a second pick of his career already would be great. So thank you very much. Hope this helped you out. Good luck with your lineups. And don't forget, you can come visit me live 1 hour prior to kickoff tomorrow. And if you liked it, like the video. Bye.